Technology has always created more opportunities than it's destroyed. I see no reason to believe this will be any different. Let's say that's true, that robots and AI do everything that everybody does now. That's a huge amount of productivity that just got scooped out by some buddies. They're not going to bury the wealth in their backyard. They're going to spend it or invest it. And it's the spending and investing of it that creates the opportunities.
Welcome to the Workspace Talk Show. I couldn't be more excited to have Dr. Peter Linneman with us today. He is the CEO and founder of Linneman Associates, and he is the Emeritus Professor of Real Estate Finance, Business, Public Policy at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, where he was on faculty for 35 years, was the founding chairman of Wharton's Real Estate Department, the director of Wharton's Zell-Lurie Real Estate Center for 13 years, and the founding co-editor of the Wharton Real Estate Review. Dr. Linneman, thank you for joining us. From the outside, your identity is really closely tied to real estate from us out here and the rest of the world. What is it about real estate that got you so deeply in that you find yourself a lifetime in, a career into this that pulled you in young, that didn't burn you out, that didn't let you drift onto other things, but you've kept digging deeper and now you're here. Why and how did that happen?
Well, I find real estate is an interesting combination of things I'm interested in. The macroeconomy, capital markets, supply and demand, industrial organization issues, some regulatory issues. And if you think about it, now, not everyone has to do all those elements,
Sure.
right?
Most don't.
But it is an interesting combination of all those. Yes, you have the rent and occupancy coming from supply and demand, and that's fascinating. But then you also have, how does the capital market value an income stream? That's cap rates and multiples. You have macroeconomy driving demands and trade. So I find it a very interesting interaction of things I'm interested in.
Yeah, and it's
And I
extremely
can't say that about
dynamic
it.
too. Everything you just described, right? If each of those are a variable, it makes it so dynamic that it's never really the same. Even if the things that we're thinking about, the end products might be similar.
Constantly changing.
Yeah.
And it's easy to cheat in because it's a long-term industry,
Uh-huh.
right? And I was just saying yesterday in an event, we signed recently a 30-year lease with the with the city as our tenant, and brand new building. And I said, gee, it's easy to be excited about what's the Fed going to do with the interest rate and what's going to happen and what's going to happen and all these shiny objects. But 30 years from now, when this lease expires, I'm going to be 105.
Uh-huh.
And the building's only going to be 30 years old. And that's not that old for a building,
Yeah.
right? And there is a long run dimension of it, much more than most industries. I mean, how many industries, how many businesses are still alive from 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very
How
few.
many buildings are still alive
Sure.
from 30 years
Yeah,
ago?
very few.
And the reason I say that is that the skill set I have is probably better suited to long-term analysis than real short-term. I mean, give you a very simple example. I don't know when the Strait of Hormuz is going to open, and I don't know, but I do know that some solution is going to be found.
Sure.
I don't know exactly when. I don't know exactly what. But I know it'll happen. I know oil prices will come down dramatically over a subsequent period of time. And
Well,
if for no other reason,
let's dig into that a
then
little bit because in your recent letter, in the spring letter, you point out that unlike the 70s, the fracking revolution really allowed for us to be in this moment and not have the same pressures or the same pain that we had then. So we're less
yeah.
vulnerable to the Strait of Hormuz being disrupted. Where do you see that going? I'd love to hear just your opinion. I know that you wrote that in the letter, but I'd love to hear just your opinion on it.
So I'll give you the difference. This is a bit of an example of the difference of the way I think and most people think. Most people are trying to figure out how is Trump, how is Netanyahu, and how is Iran going to come up with a near-term solution?
Hmm.
Okay? And that's interesting to me, but I have no impact on it. It's going to be what it's going to
Uh-huh.
be. But I'm sitting here saying there's no way Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait, Oman are going to allow, forget the United States, forget Israel. There's no way those countries are going to allow Iran to impoverish them.
Sure.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
They may allow them to dent their economy for a while, but do you really think Saudi Arabia and the
Dubai. Yeah.
Emirates,
Yeah. United Arab
Dubai,
Emirates. Yeah.
all that are going to say, yeah, Iran, you can shut it. You can impoverish us. My people will revolt as a result. I'll either die or be exiled. Um, uh, my power base is gone. Do you really believe they'll allow that to happen? No, no. Independent of the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah.
Now, I therefore I know there'll be a solution. Right? There'll absolutely be a solution, and that solution will allow a lot of energy to flow through that strait, okay? And when that does, I know oil prices are gonna come back down, and when that does, I know that'll be deflationary rather than inflationary, which it was on the way up. And when it does, I know it will reduce any pressure to raise interest rates, and quite the opposite, renew the pressure to reduce interest
Sure.
rates. Do I know exactly how any of that will transpire? No. But it does show the difference of long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. I'm not saying short-term thinking is bad. I'm just saying, but you've read a lot, you've heard a lot, you've heard it, and I'm willing to bet you've not heard somebody say as simply as I just said, why it's gotta open.
Oh, yeah. Or
Because
that it will, just that it will. We know it will, right? I don't think
that it
people are
will.
yeah, people kind of have this short view of, like, they don't wanna just say, like, "Oh, it will. Of course it will." Right? Like, on some level, of course it will. What is the time frame? Nobody's gonna guess. We're not in the business of doing that. Is the macro economy insulated from this a little bit? Yes. But to your point, as you go micro, there's gonna be more and more friction. So and I say
Yeah,
that to, like, a geographic level, but also industry level. I haven't thought about some of the things that you've just talked about in this intro as much right now as I have since maybe, like, 2008. I think the treasury bonds market is one of those places. I think that understanding the interest rate is more key than ever, but I think that that has the weird politics of now having to, like, watch the dynamics happening on the Fed. And so I think that there's a weird thing happening there and watching dissents. And I was never in the business of watching some of those interactions on the Fed before. Have you seen that cycle in the past? Have you seen cycles like
sure.
that in the past?
Sure. That's one of the advantages of being old. There's gotta be some advantage.
Experience and
Well,
knowledge seems like a
and
good one.
you just get to see more, and you realize this is not the most divisive period in our history.
Mm.
It's not even the most divisive period in my life,
Mm.
much less the most divisive period in the history of this country, right? I'm not saying there's not a lot of animus, but, and you go like, trust me, when they were drafting a lot of young people who did wanna go to Vietnam, where lots of people were being killed and injured and so forth, it was a lot more
Sure.
animals. And you say the politics and, I was around when Richard Nixon, his vice president had to resign, then he had to resign, and the Speaker of the House eventually becomes the president. The Speaker of the House becomes president? I mean, I knew it was possible, but and so when you see that, I wasn't around during World War II, but I was around and know that generation quite well, right? That was my parents' generation and a lot of friends in that generation. You talk to them, did you think it would ever end?
Mhm.
No. I mean, it was just it had to end, but they couldn't imagine it ending because it was just grinding on and grinding on and grinding on, and then it was over. and there are lessons from that, which is good things come to an end and bad things come to an end, but the arc is generally positive,
Mhm.
at least in this country. The arc is generally positive. So people say, well, are people still going to want to invest here? And I don't know if you're a basketball fan, some of your listeners may be, but I was saying Wayembe, um, if you were picking a if you were starting your team right now and you had a top draft choice and you didn't have to pay for it, you'd probably pick him,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Yeah, but wouldn't he be better if he was 35 pounds of muscle better? And you go, yeah, but he'd still be your top pick, right?
Sure.
In spite of the fact he needs at least 35 pounds or 40 pounds of muscle. Yeah, but he'd still be your top pick. That's the United States. Would we be even a better top pick as a place to invest if we had 35 pounds more muscle? Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're still the top pick. Where else you gonna go?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think when we look at look, I'll speak to equities markets a little bit more specifically, but when we look to equities markets, literally, where else are you gonna go? Like, if you look, you can't look to Europe, you could maybe look in some places in Asia, but unless you're gonna literally hedge in
You're gonna put a lot of money into the markets in China
no,
or
no,
India?
no, not I mean, not a lot for sure, I wouldn't think.
That's
Again
the point. I've said to people, real people, normal people, not professionals like you. Um, I was just saying to one of our daughters in Germany, yeah, invest in US companies. And she says, yeah, but I'd like to have exposure to Europe and to Asia and I said, well, where do you think Microsoft and Coca-Cola and Apple and where are they getting a lot of their revenue? Where are they getting a lot of their growth?
yeah,
You can invest in those economies
yeah,
and yet have our capital market and regulatory framework, which is not perfect, but you get our judicial system, our capital market, our regulatory framework. It's not a pure bet, but come on, a lot of the growth in Apple has been because of sales outside the
sure.
US. Just for
Yeah, those are
example,
not
Disney,
American companies, those are all very global companies, and the profits that they're bringing back into the United States and the way
right?
that we
And so
tax
that's
them on
the
those profits
way,
are all for
you know.
for the benefit of America for sure.
I don't think I don't know why I think that way, but I'm always amazed that a lot of people don't think that way.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm just odd. My wife believes so, but
Okay, well, look, I'm gonna rein us into a different question based on some of this conversation, though, because I'm curious from your perspective as an educator, and given the trajectory you just talked about, is it more dangerous to come into real estate or these kind of knowledge working professions today than it was 20 or 30 years ago? And when you think about all of the like future doomsaying about automation, AI, how we're thinking about, reconstructing cities, layouts, whatever. Does that velocity change or make it riskier to pick the industry of real estate in this moment than it did at those times?
no, I think it's the most exciting time to be. I think almost every time, unless there's a major war going on, is the best time to be a young person. Obviously, World War II was not the best time to be a young person.
Mhm.
You could argue during parts of the Vietnam War was or Korean War were not the best time to be. It was a good time to be a young person if you didn't get front line or drafted or drawn out of the economy.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think it's almost always a good time to be young. I think almost every year is better than last year. There are little cyclical things. Why? Um, what you really would have been better off coming into the economy when young workers walk behind plow horses.
Yeah.
Cholera was rampant.
Sure.
Um, I don't need it.
Yeah,
No
yeah, no,
polio
this is the
vaccine.
difficulty of existential thought, right? Like, it's really hard for us
Yeah,
to think backwards and like, oh, well, just look at average lifespan or whatever it is. Think about how GDP has functioned over centuries, and these things are great indicators. But they're statistically relevant, but it's really hard for us to see them as individuals because our lived sample size is this one lived sample size,
when
right?
you got it. When I'm walking home from the office in a pouring rain, it's the worst rain ever. Not statistically, but I'm in it.
Sure.
And I think that's the nature of a young person entering the job market. I'll give you a variant of that. Um, I get asked I stay in touch with a lot of former students, and I talk to them about their career. Alumni weekend was this last weekend,
Fun.
so I had several drop by and so forth. And, you know, irrespective of their age, it's the worst age to find a job, you know? And I remember when they were 22-year-olds, it was the worst time ever to find a job, according to them. And now they're 32. I remember now they're 42. Now they're 52. It's always the worst time to find a job. It's always hard to find a job. It's always difficult. You either have not enough experience or too much, or you have the expectations. And so it's always difficult. Life is difficult, right? And I think we, we tend to forget life is difficult, but every day the arc is upward, unless you are in a combat kind of situation.
Yeah.
Technology has always created more opportunities than it's destroyed. I see no reason to believe this will be any different. You have these stories that say, well, AI is going to do all the jobs, and any job they don't, a robot's going to do, and there'll be nothing for anyone to do.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, let's just think about that for a second. Somebody, let's say that's true, that robots and AI do everything that everybody does now. Everything, including what you and I are doing, right? Our agenics do this,
Yeah.
right? We don't even screw around.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of productivity that just got scooped out by some buddies. They're not going to bury the wealth associated with scooping out that productivity in their backyard. They're going to spend it or invest it. And it's the spending and investing of it that creates the opportunities. And the opportunity is going to be we're going to be able to work less and do more.
Uh-huh.
And that's the history of technology is we no longer work 6.5 days a week. We no longer walk behind a plow horse. We no longer, you know, um, we still work hard, but probably our work week is down to 36 hours realistically in this country.
Yeah. If not slightly more, yeah.
And, and we're down to probably 49, 48 work weeks. And God bless. And we have more money than we did when, when Charles Dickens wrote Christmas Carol. You realize everybody was working. Cratchit didn't want to work, and that was unusual that he didn't want to
Yeah.
work, right? Nobody, so it's a very different world. We will get more leisure and we'll get more resources. And will some people get more than others? Of
Yeah, of
course.
course. Yeah.
Will some people suffer more transitionally than others? Of
Yeah.
course. Will some people gain enormously transitionally?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, there's a bunch of systemic levers there. Look, as I was giving you a little bit of information about myself, it's I think important for this conversation to acknowledge. Like today, I'm the CEO of an AI construction management company. It's called Level. That's what we do, and we're helping people figure out where those efficiencies are. To your point, when I took on this challenge, I had a couple of things in mind. One, I don't want to make software that makes software or software that makes data. I wanted to build some stuff out in the real world. It was really key to my thinking about whatever these automation tools do, is that I want there to be this thing out there. But in this process, I've talked to about 50 CEOs of general contracting firms. And it's been really interesting because it does lead to these two questions, and you're kind of answering one of them, which is the first question is this kind of self-referential question that people ask all the time is, am I behind my competition? The second question that I get all the time, it's this question of, um, is this going to reduce my staff, or is it going to give my people efficiency in such a way that they are a multiplier? What I would say is that there are going to be more solutions and more possibilities because, to your point, if we're not doing the millions of tasks that we're doing every year in our jobs, all of a sudden we have all of these brilliant resources to apply to all of the other problems and situations that we have in front of us as humans.
So my father worked as a laborer at um, Standard Oil of Ohio refinery and was part of the era of mechanization, early computerization, not the computerization that would ultimately come, and it eliminated jobs. And I grew up in a manufacturing environment and so forth. And I'm sure that my father's generation was terrified there'd be no work, not only for them, but what are their sons and daughters going to do? Right? Because now somebody that had to do this, now 3 guys are all that are needed for where there were 10. And imagine somebody would have said to them, don't worry about your grandson. Don't worry about your son. Your son is going to work for Apple Computer. And he'll say, my son's going to work for Apple? What the hell is an Apple? He's going to sell
Uh-huh.
apples? And no, Apple. Apple makes computers that have a million times the capacity of the computer you have at Standard Oil of Ohio, and probably more than a million times, right?
Sure, I'm sure.
And um, and they're also going to make devices that are phones and mobile computers that you can hold in your hands and you can watch
And
movies.
take pictures.
And he's going to say, yeah. And he's going to say, well, first of all, how much is that thing going to cost? And you're going to tell him the price. And even after you adjust for inflation, he says, who the hell's going to have that kind of
Uh-huh.
money? And where are they going to come up with the money to buy that kind of stuff? And I don't even understand what you're talking about. And and of course, all the productivities that occurred gave us the time, gave us the money to do that. And yet it would be completely inconceivable to my father. My father died at 49. So even when he dies in 1970, it would have been inconceivable to him,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So my point is that who would have dreamed? Who would have
yeah.
dreamed of the things people do? And and by the way, our imaginations are no better than my
Oh,
father's.
sure. Yeah,
No better than our fathers. And much less our grandfathers and grandmothers and great grandparents.
yeah.
When we sit here today and I'm an old guy and or a young person goes, I can't imagine what these people will do. You go, that's not because they won't be doing something. That's a statement about how limited your
Yeah,
imagination
where our
is.
capacities are, how our
It's our
paradigm.
capacity to imagine
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
is the problem, not that there won't be things.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, and I think that that's a beautiful way to think about what the potential is, and when I think about some of the fear that's getting put into young people by media and social media and all of these things, I think I'm really aligned with everything you're saying. I know that there's real opportunity, and honestly, I genuinely keep having this question with myself, with my wife, like, actually, isn't there more opportunity right now than there ever has been all of the time? And it just seems to be like iterating on itself all of the time.
One of the things I uh, tend to do is when I get a medical procedure is ask the doctor who's doing the procedure, what would have happened in 1960? What was the state of the art so I had cataract surgery, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. And they said, well, in 1960, you would have been immobilized for a month. Just lay in bed for a month with your head, kind of, and when you go to the bathroom, you have to be very careful and so forth. They did it. I walked out. Mm, it was over. And we just lose sight of the fact of the breakthroughs
Uh-huh.
that can happen and how they enrich life. We move so slowly forward that it's hard to appreciate how far we've come.
Uh-huh. I want to ask, 35 years at Wharton, and now you're the founder and principal at Linneman Associates. I want to just dig in for a second about what are you spending your time doing? How are you thinking about what it is that you want Linneman Associates focused on and what the direction is for the team there?
Okay, so I started Linneman Associates by chance in 1979. I had I was had my PhD for a couple of years, was teaching at the University of Chicago. Wharton had come along. I had just decided to move to Wharton. Um, and I got a call. This just to show you how the world is. I got a call from the number 2 or 3 person at the third largest paper manufacturer in the world at that time, and said, "We hear you're a bright young guy, and we would like to hire you to do some consulting for us." You're like, "Okay." And I said yes, which was smart, even though I had no idea what I do. I knew nothing about the paper industry. But back to where we were talking about real estate, I'm curious, I'm a good learner, I can figure stuff out and so forth. And then 2 days later, I got an almost identical phone call from Michelin Tire
Huh.
US. Almost identical phone call. And I did work for each of them and then other companies and so forth. Um, so I always had this kind of dual career of full-time academic, ran a program, taught a lot of classes, wrote a book, blah, 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 blah. But I also had this other career, which started out not in real estate. By 1985, 87, had shifted to mostly real estate in the way that you never anticipated, but it happened.
Uh-huh.
Right? Um, so what am I working on now? We started Linneman Letter about 26 years ago, and it was a very simple idea that a couple of former students of mine had, which is a lot of people like to hear what you think, and some of them are willing to pay you. And maybe we could come up together where you could write a product, we process it and so forth and help you and and maybe somebody might want to pay for it. Yeah, who knows? Nobody was doing that kind of product. And I remember we did we did the first edition and sent it out complimentary to a bunch of people. I don't know if anybody interested. And about 2 days later, Albert Ratner called and said, "It's great, but here's all the things that are wrong with it, and we'll sign up." A real friend, he helped improve. And the next day, Sam Zell called, said, "It's really great. I'm not going to try to impersonate Sam's voice. It's really great, and keep it up." And then Ron Terwilliger, Tremco Residential, called, very dear friend, and said, "Yeah, it's really great, but you need to focus more on whatever." And that's how that happened. Okay, so there was a time when I was working about 3,500 to 4,000 hours a year
Uh-huh.
between the university, boards, writing, Linneman Letter, clients, etc.
Yeah, for the uninitiated,
I'm
that's more hours than a partner at a law firm.
Yeah, but I had 2 full-time jobs,
Sure.
and I think I did them both pretty well. Um, and I'm down now to probably 1,500 hours a year. Um, I I have a no jerks policy. Um, if somebody calls me and says, "I'd like you to work with me," and I think they're a jerk, I'll say, "Ooh, I don't have the bandwidth." I just started it when I was around 50 saying,
I don't
not that
have
I
the
make
patience for this.
I just don't, by the way, when you're young, you don't have that
Yeah, you
you
don't have the
just don't have
luxury of
that
that for sure.
I
Yeah,
don't have that
of course.
luxury. But by 50, I could have that luxury. So these days, I work a lot on Linneman Letter. I have Regency I'm still on the board of. I work much more on charity these days.
Yeah, let's dive into that
I
a little bit because you and your wife have a charity. It's called Save a Mind Elimu.
Elimu, which
Elimu.
is educator in Swahili.
It's in Swahili. Sorry, what does it mean again?
Elimu is education
Education.
in
Got
Swahili,
it.
and it's a Kenya-based operation. I got into it the same way I got into consulting, which is I had a couple of they're now all grown up children and so forth, and a couple of the girls, and I said, "Where do you want to go on holiday?" And they said, "We want to do a safari." And I said, "I'm not interested in this." Is like late 2002. And okay, okay, okay. I'm not a nature person. So we went and we did 9 days. And after 7 days, I mean, I enjoyed being with them, but I was completely bored. If I saw another lion, and I don't need to see another lion, and I don't see the need to see another elephant, another tree, or birds, and so forth. So I said to our guide, um, this is the only place I've ever been on holiday where you don't really encounter people. So I said, "Can you take us out and show us life?" So they took us out to about 10 villages. Oh my God. And there was no mandatory education then. Tons of kids standing around doing nothing instead of being in school. So we started thinking we'll do 4 kids. And the person who I'm still very friendly with, the person who was my guide then, said, "Don't just support him for a year or two, because that's unintentionally cruel." And if you think about it, it is. It's not, you're not intending to be cruel, but you take this second grader and you put him through 2 years of school and then you disappear
Sure.
and they're hung out. And so we made a commitment that we would support them and feed them and clothe them and mentor them and teach them how to do a resume and how to do an interview and on and on and on. And but it started with 4 12-year-olds, and we just had the report come out. I think it's on our website, and we've graduated 300 or so, 350.
Wow,
We've got
amazing.
170, and it grew out of 4, and we have an extraordinary director of the program over there, and she is called the magician. Her name is Faith Ryunga, and Faith is the magician. Why is she called the magician? She turned 4 children into 500 by basically constantly saying, "Well, of course, I've got these 3 more kids. We've got these 3 other kids. Can we figure out a way to do okay, we can do 3 more."
What is the why in that? And what is the purpose in how you're thinking about where you're at, this work that you're doing? And I didn't mean this more from the professional's perspective and how you're talking about rounding out with we're doing charity work. I think it's really important for people to find these places that aren't just work all the time because working with a
Yeah.
charity is still a kind of work. It's just it
Yep.
feeds different parts of you. So I'd love for you to just kind of say to those people that do have another 35, 40 years in us, what should I be thinking about? What should I if you could tell your 48-year-old self, "Hey, keep this in mind," what would that be?
So, I would say several things. Life is a long time, and live it like it's precious, but understand it's a long time, and there are bumps in the road. It's a great journey. It can be a great journey, but there'll be bumps in the road, and you gotta get up from the bumps
Mhm.
to enjoy the rest of the journey. That's one. Imagine if you got a flat tire, you say, "Well, hell, I'm not gonna
That car
go,"
lives
and
on
it
the
could
side of the
be
road now. Okay, bye.
yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Okay, so that's one. Um, Second is just try to move the ball forward. Just try to move the ball forward, whatever the ball is, if you're working. So, for example, how did I write the book that you alluded to in real estate? I did it because I was teaching the class and I couldn't find a book that was very helpful for students. And I thought they deserved to have a helpful book. So I said, okay, we'll record my lectures and we'll just type them up and make notes that are available. Well, then you look at the spoken word and it's completely clear why you're speaking it, but not why you're
Yep.
reading it.
Just doesn't go the same.
So
Doesn't read the
then I
same.
said,
Yeah.
well, I need to move the ball
Sure.
forward. Let's make a book out. Okay, so we do that. Just move the ball forward. Is it the greatest book that will ever be written on the topic? I hope not. I really hope not, right? So just try to move the ball forward. In terms of investing or doing business, just try to move the ball forward. Try to leave things a little better than they were before. People will say to me, how did you and Sam Zell become friends? How did you and, well, it's no different than how my wife and we've been married 53 years. How did we meet? How did we become? How did I become friends with so-and-so? How did I get the Kenya program? How did I do the book? How did I start a consulting business, etc.? They all were something, and you said yes rather than no,
Mhm.
and you tried to move the ball forward. And most people, or too many people, instinctively say no.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you should always say yes, but too many people instinctively say no. And then there are two other things. One is, come on, we're in business. We should try to make as much money as is possible, legally and honorably, and to be successful at doing what we're trying to do. Try to move the ball forward, try to make money. That's all good. I'm all for that. But I would always close my classes at Wharton by saying never confuse the word success with monetary success. Monetary success is one of the tributaries of success,
Mhm.
but it's not the only form. And I said that I always would say, I refuse to live in a world where someone like Mother Teresa is viewed as a failure because she wasn't rich. And the other thing was, I was blessed by a lot of amazing people in my life, and the number of amazing people in my life is staggering. But I was very blessed to have, as a dear friend and mentor for about 55 years, she passed away about 2 years ago. To put her in context, she was the only woman in her MBA class at Northwestern in 1946.
Wow.
Okay, and she was on 5 Fortune 500 boards when they didn't want women, back in the day, right? She had the phrase, and we've adopted it at Sam Elimu as our guiding light. And she was about 90. So I don't know, so that was 90, so 15 years ago. I was 60, let's say. So I was old enough to have some perspective. And I asked her, what's all this about? What's light? What's all this about? She goes, well, it's about love, being loved, and being productive. If you can do that in everything you do, you'll do okay in life. If you can have love, be loved, and be productive. Be productive if you're playing a pickup game. Be productive if you're playing cards with your friends. Be productive if you're being a husband or wife, or be productive if you're a teacher or an investor. Just be productive. And I think being productive generates a lot of happiness. And so this phrase, love, be loved, and be productive, is really I didn't create it. Lucille Ford created it,
But
but
it's become a mantra.
it's really become a
Yeah.
mantra, at least over the last 15 years.
I mean, as we wrap this up, I feel really blessed to have this time with you. I think our audience will. I'm really, really quite grateful for your time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're very kind to have me, and I hope it was reasonably interesting
Thank
for
you, sir. Hey, y'all, Nathan here. If you've made it this far, you're clearly interested in construction, architecture, and commercial real estate. So head over to our YouTube channel and check out some other episodes. And while you're there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel grow. Want to connect with us directly? Find us on LinkedIn, where we chat with guests, listeners, and some of the best businesses in our industry. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.